Good morning, guys, and welcome back to the garden. We spent this weekend camping in the Gila wilderness and just got back, and I figured it was time for an almost June garden tour. Because honestly, this garden is popping. There's so much growth. So here in this first bed, I still have onions that I have not pulled out yet, and one sunflower. But I have been pulling out some as they mature and eating them in the house. So see how this has fallen over and this stem is soft. When this plant falls over, the bulb will no longer get any nutrients. So you know it's ready to harvest once they lay flat like that. And all these obviously have not laid down yet, so I'm just leaving them in to get as big as possible before I pull them up and then cure them for storage. I've slowly been getting more and more falling down, so they should all be coming to harvest time pretty quickly. And I already bought bags of soil so that I can re-amend this bed and then plant something new. Not sure what I'm putting in there yet. I'm thinking beans, a bush bean variety, but we'll see. Look how big this guy is. This variety is Texas Early Grano. It's a yellow onion. And this one is pretty darn huge. Here on this trellis, I have my Armenian cucumber finally taking off. It took quite a while to get established. I think the soil health in this bed is pretty poor because over here I also have Armenian cucumber that I planted later, and it's doing better than those first ones over there. But they're coming along. They'll be producing fairly soon. I've got several flowers on here that should be making me some little cukes. And in this bed I have Genovese basil and various squashes. I believe these two are, actually I have no clue. I know that one is a tromboncino, and I have a little baby tromboncino squash coming up. So these should take quite a while to mature. I won't be harvesting them anytime soon, but it is exciting to see that one's been put out already. And very obviously these three are yellow squashes, and I have already harvested one yellow squash from the front yard garden, but these are coming along quite nicely as well. A little small, but as I said before, I think the soil health is one of the poorest in my garden in this bed. If y'all remember earlier in the year, these two first beds, the one with the onions and the one with these squashes, I made this year, and I just did a sort of lasagna method inside the raised garden bed because I didn't have a whole lot of soil. So the plants are struggling a bit. Not only are they in full sun for a large part of the day, they don't have the shade cloth over them, but they also don't have a whole lot of nutrient-rich soil to grow from. But they're doing fine. They're still alive. They'll just probably produce a little bit less than my other beds. And here in my huge tomato bed, I have tomatoes galore. This is an Amish paste, this plant right here. And right here I have a German pink, I believe. This is an heirloom variety. It's ripens to a sort of pinkish red color. Very good slicer, and they get pretty big. And then this tomato, I had told you guys, and I have it labeled as a gold medal. But after these started to come up, I realized they are not a gold medal variety. The gold medal that I've grown before is a slicer variety, and these were not saved seeds. They came from a packet. So what I believe these are the chocolate pear tomato, which I started this year. And I didn't have very good germination on the chocolate pear, but this is a pear tomato. None of them have ripened yet, but I'm thinking I just got them mixed up. And this is obviously not a gold medal. I think it's going to be the chocolate pear. I've never grown the chocolate pear before, but it's the only pear-shaped tomato that I started, so it's gotta be it, right? And here is a cherry tomato variety called Mexico Midget. I have great luck growing these every year, and there's a lot of tomatoes on this trellis, more than I would like. They're going to be running out of room soon, so what I've started doing is trellising this onto this bean trellis, and I'm just gonna have this whole Mexico Midget tomato plant kind of move over this way so that these have more room to grow. And directly on the other side, I have a giant crimson tomato, which if I can, there's a big one right there. And here's some more. And here's another one right here. That's fasciated blossom. So we might have to pick this one early if it continues to rot here on the bottom. And right under these cosmos, I planted a new start that I bought at the store the other day, which is called Lemon Boy. As per my last video, I had to pull up half of my tomato plants because they had curly top virus. So when I went to the store, I think I bought 2 tomato plants and 2 peppers, or was it 3 tomatoes and 1 pepper? I don't remember, but I bought a few tomato plants just to fill in the spaces where I had pulled out the dead and dying ones. And the Lemon Boy, which I've never tried before, is one of those varieties. Directly north in this pepper bed, these peppers are doing so great. These beans right here are the rattlesnake pole beans, and I replanted spots that didn't germinate with some asparagus beans. These did not do too well for me last year. It was a little too hot for them to fruit during the middle of the summer, but they seem to be growing just fine, so we'll see how they produce for me this year. But these peppers, guys, look how many. So this first one is called a Jalafuego, which it's a jalapeno variety, but I guess it gets hotter than a jalapeno. I didn't have good luck with this last year, but it's doing very well this year. And actually some of these I could probably harvest right about now. They can get a little bit bigger though. We really like bacon wrapped stuffed jalapenos in this family, so I want them to get a little bit bigger so that they are awesomely delicious. And right here I also have a Jalafuego. And these 3 plants are actually peppers I am super excited about that I have not tried yet, and they are doing wonderfully. And they are the Sugar Rush Peach. I have several peppers that are starting to ripen. They're definitely growing, but they're gonna turn a sort of pinkish orangey color, so these are nowhere near ripe yet. But I love peppers that look really wrinkly because it looks like they're gonna be super mean and super spicy. So these look super mean and spicy. Then here I have a shishito pepper, another Sugar Rush Peach, a banana pepper, and I believe a banana pepper over there. And these guys are adorable. I grew them last year as well. They're called the mini chocolate bell pepper. So it's just a little miniature bell pepper. This is about as big as they're gonna get, and they'll turn a rich brown color. I only grew, I think, 1 or 2 of the chocolate mini bells because last year when I had them, they're great just if you want some sort of bell pepper flavor like in a salad or something, but obviously they're so tiny you can't really stuff them. And I love stuffed bell peppers if I use, you know, bell peppers for anything. So I didn't want to waste too much space on them because they're cute and fun sized, but for actual meal cooking, they're rather useless. And this Tahitian melon squash is out of control. So this is probably the largest plant I currently have in my garden, and it just took off and kept going. It went all the way to the top of this trellis, and now I have it coming down here, and I've affixed it to the pole. I've got several runners coming out the side, and I have several squashes starting to form, I believe, and there's one right here as well. I've never grown the Tahitian melon squash. I have a lot of squash varieties that I started this year that I've never grown before, and they're very large squashes. If I have a picture, I'll put it up here. But I'm hoping even if I don't like some of the squash that I ended up growing, that they could be used as a substitute to supplement my chicken feed or something like that. And this ginormous plant looks like it's going to be putting off a lot of food. And I have this chamomile plant right in the middle. I've been harvesting quite a lot off of. I think I almost have probably a liter's full of dried chamomile blossoms, but it is getting a bit too hot for this guy. and he's starting to dwindle down and suffer. So one of these days in the upcoming weeks, I'll probably trim him back all the way down to the roots to give the peppers more light and see if he comes back up after the monsoon season in the fall. Now coming back to the south side of the garden, I have this other monstrosity of a squash plant, which I'm fairly certain is a tromboncino squash. There are some fruits on here. They look very similar to the Tahitian melon, but I'm pretty sure this is a tromboncino squash. Here I have some holy basil, or sometimes called tulsi, as well as Genovese basil right next to it. And this tomato, which is on a very small and probably needs to be put on a different trellis. But this is an estiva. It's an F1 hybrid seed that I got from Johnny's this year. It's supposed to be pretty heat tolerant, and so far it's done really well, and I have several estiva tomato plants. The rest are over here in this tomato bed. But I still haven't figured out how I'm going to trellis this guy because I'm out of cattle panels. And I don't want to go buy a whole cattle panel just for one tomato plant. But I also have this tomato plant. And he's standing upright so far, but I'm pretty sure fairly soon he's gonna topple over and sprawl. Like, that's what tomatoes do when you don't trellis them. Here I have a eucalyptus plant that came back from last year, as well as two pepper plants. This is the Bikino pepper. It's a small little yellow spicing pepper. And then this is one of the new ones I got when I went to the store the other day. Oh, New Mexico Big Jim. This is a cultivated variety from New Mexico State University, I believe. So in these two trellis beds, I had planted beans along here, and then if y'all remember, I had the onion sets that I planted on the outside of each. The onion sets ended up not bulbing up, which means they were probably a long day variety onion. I did harvest them anyways and use the tiny little root balls they had. They weren't, you can't call them bulbs, but they taste like onion, and then I used the tops as well, and I freeze those for uses in like soups and stews that you can just throw some frozen green onions in. And after I took those out, I replanted the bed with some calendula and marigold, since I don't have these. I have a few calendula elsewhere in my garden, but they're not the yellow resin variety that I like to use for salves. And then these beans are both a mix of asparagus beans, which that's what this is right here, and this is the purple hull pink eye cowpea. But I had to replant with some asparagus beans because roly-polies kept eating these guys. So I just have a mix of beans in all of my bean beds. And it's the same over here, the mixture of beans and then two calendula and a marigold. Now this is a bed of hybrid determinate tomatoes, which means that they're not going to get super tall and big and keep growing. They'll just put out a set amount of fruit and then be done. And if you come all the way in here, I have one of the biggest tomatoes I have in my garden. This guy. He's huge. He's probably the biggest one I currently have growing. And they don't need a ton of trellising, determinate tomato varieties, I mean. And I didn't want to do a whole bunch of work on my trellis. So what I did was this Florida weave. I just sunk these posts into the ground. And what a Florida weave is just pieces of string tied in a line, and they're taut. They're very tight. And they're gonna hold these plants up at least a little bit from flopping over. But it's a very simple way to trellis tomatoes. And that's what I've done I have 4 plants in here. And that's what I'm just gonna keep doing until these guys stop growing, because I don't wanna buy another trellis or do anything like that. And this was a super simple way to trellis these guys for a little bit and not have to spend any money. And here is my 3rd largest tomato bed. This bed is actually 10 feet long, although I do not have 10 feet of tomatoes, because here at the end I have some cucumbers that are growing very slowly, but they finally started taking off, and I even have some blooms here, which is nice to see. I think I'm just gonna let them sprawl out on the ground, because again, I don't have another trellis, nor do I want to go buy one. And we don't get a whole lot of rain here, so I'm not super worried about powdery mildew or any other fungal diseases that befall sprawling plants on the ground. We have no moisture, so shouldn't be too much of a problem. But here's the other Estiva. This is the F1 hybrid that I had over in the other bed. And they seem to be cute little tomatoes. They were supposed to be slicers, but they don't look that big. So maybe like sort of saladette type tomatoes. That's doing just fine. Next up we have a German pink, which is the large slicing heirloom tomato that I love. Another Estiva. And another Estiva. Now down the other end of this row is where I had to take out like 3 tomato plants that had curly top virus. And there's still one more that I have not taken out. Not for any particular reason, I just haven't done it yet. But the 2 plants I replaced them with, I bought from the store. And these guys are, this is a German Johnson, which is an heirloom variety. And this one is a German Queen, which I've never heard of, so I'll be excited to see what that one looks like. But here and here are 2 brand new small tomato plants that I replaced with the dying ones that I had. And then here is another victim of curly top disease, which I just need to pull that guy out. All along the outer edge of this bed, I have several little plants such as basil, a Thai basil. That's a random pepper I do not have a tag for. These are the Bright Lights Cosmos, which just keep showing up day after day. I love it. And this is safflower, also called poor man's saffron. You can use these petals very similarly to saffron spice. I have not used them. They're pretty. They're also fairly pokey. But they do develop seeds, and I'm sure everyone here has heard of safflower oil, which is extracted from the seed pods of these guys. So I, of course, do not have a seed oil press, but I think it's cool to grow them nonetheless. They're actually pretty heat and drought tolerant, and I don't know if they're grown naturally in New Mexico, but I know they're grown in more arid parts of the world. So this was a cool experiment to see if I could grow this. Back here in the garlic bed, I still have not harvested all of my garlic. It's getting about time to pull a lot of these guys out though, so that's on my to-do list. And this is currently the only flowering calendula variety I have, which is the Touch of Red Buff calendula. It's beautiful, but it's not the variety you want to be using if you want to, you know, make like a calendula infused oil for skin treatments and salves. It has the properties that you want, but it doesn't have the maximum amount of resin inside of the flower that the actual yellow variety does, which is why I replanted those bean trellis areas with the yellow variety. And then here I have a random unnamed tomato plant I plan on trellising up along this side of the bean trellis. And when I seeded the okra the other day on the garlic harvesting video, I had several come up, but they got eaten by roly-poly. So these are the 2 that are left. And I think what I'm going to do is once I harvest this garlic, I'm going to probably try and direct sow some more okra. But I might have to start them indoors because my roly-poly problem is horrendous, and they tend to eat all of my seedlings all of the time. So if I want to get any okra in any reasonable amount of time, I might just have to start it indoors so that they don't all get eaten over and over again when I seed them in the yard. So here on this trellis, I have only the asparagus beans, which are also called noodle beans. And then this bed is largely comprised of pepper varieties, except I do have some summer savory right here that's going to flower, and the flowers are so cute. And then yarrow, of course, and yarrow, which I have everywhere. But the pepper varieties in here are going to be a bell pepper, padron. I do have the habanero roulette pepper that I bought from the NMSU plant sale right here, as well as shishitos, which I already have shishitos coming up, if you can see that right there. And I think I have several banana peppers in here. I told y'all that I didn't want so many banana peppers in my garden this year, and then it's the only thing that ended up surviving. So I have a ton. I don't want them all, but they'll be good. I'll find a way to preserve them this year, I guess. And here in the in-ground garden, y'all, look at all of these sunflower plants that just volunteered. And they are so hardy. Most of them are growing right here in the middle of the walkway, which obviously doesn't get watered because I have drip irrigation here on the mounds. So these guys are just surviving on something. I don't know what. They're not getting water. It doesn't rain that much. But all of these just self-seeded in the wood chips right here. And are they not just gorgeous? Now, this is obviously a multi-headed variety. I don't know the actual name. It's called a common sunflower. I got the seeds from nativeseedsearch.org, and it is a New Mexico variety. You can see these growing wild up in northern New Mexico where it rains a little bit more. But they're doing so great. Oh, I love it. And I didn't have to plant a single seed. All of this was volunteered from last year. So I think next year is going to be covered in sunflower plants, which I will have to thin out because I can't have these guys growing everywhere. They're not food. And my bees are loving them as well. All of these flowering plants, these are all potatoes that have flowered, and that means that they are starting to form their little tubers down below. Once they completely die back, I will be harvesting potatoes. And I have a few plants over here that have not fully matured yet. They just got off to a late start. And I didn't have a real good crop of potatoes this year, but I will have some. They're interspersed throughout, as well as a volunteer pumpkin that seeded itself from last year. I think there's several in here. I think there's 1, 2, 3. That's also a volunteer pumpkin. And I'm not sure which pumpkin variety it is. It was a pumpkin that we had fed the neighbor's horse, and then I just threw the scraps here into the yard, and it self-seeded, which is amazing. So obviously I had to leave it, but we'll find out what kind of pumpkin it is when it's done growing, I guess. I have little ones starting to form, but they'll be a very long while before they get to full size. Over here on the east end that doesn't get shade cloth 100% of the time, I have a few potatoes that look a little sickly. The harvest will probably be small on these. But mostly I have reseeded this area with squash. So squash here, 3 pepper plants that are doing okay. I believe these are red and green chilies. Let me see if this, yeah. So these are going to be red and green chilies, hatch green chilies. So those are doing well. These look a little sickly. They look even worse over there. And in that row they died. So it's interesting to see the progression of healthy to kind of okay to not okay to dead. And I'm not quite sure what happened. But my squash is doing fantastic. I have several varieties here, and I think I have some watermelon as well. It's doing okay. Although the real producer of these guys right now is the Ron Denise squash. And this is almost a harvestable size. I'll probably give it one more day. But I grew the Ron Denise last year. It's a bush squash variety, and it's a summer squash variety, so you eat the rind and everything. And they're the cutest little self-serve, like single serving size squashes that taste so amazing. I have another plant right here in this sun-baked bed that is not doing real well, so I'm glad that one is producing, because it does produce a lot once it gets going, and it'll be more than enough for us to eat. But I at least wanted one to come up this year because I really like it. It's a really good squash, way better than boring old zucchini. But as for the rest of these varieties, I didn't label anything. As I told you before, I just started throwing seeds in here randomly. And at this point, we're just waiting until they start producing to see what comes up. But I have little ones coming up all over the place. That is probably a watermelon or a cantaloupe, I'm just not sure which. But I've got small squash plants all along here. We'll just have to wait and see. So leaving the actual garden area, let me take you over to the in-ground bed next to the fruit trees that is doing okay, not as well as I thought it was going to turn out. A lot of my beans are looking a little sad. So the beans are growing quite slowly, and a lot of them look yellowed, which I think is from either overwatering. It's probably from overwatering and just depleting the already depleted soil of nutrients. And then in other places where I've had full bean crop failure, I just replanted some squashes, which I can link that video above, and a couple corns. And growing these beans has been a delicate challenge because it's so hot, dry, and sandy right there that I have to keep it. I have to water it every day, sometimes twice a day, just to make sure the plants don't dry out. But the problem with overwatering like that is that you're just constantly leaching the soil of nutrients, and there aren't many nutrients in that soil to begin with. So I'm trying to find a balance here. I'm hoping even if the beans do poorly this year, that's fine. It's developing the soil for next year, and I'm hoping that can be a permanent plot for food in the future. I'm gonna get out of here. These biting gnats, the no-see-ums, if you guys are familiar with them, they're everywhere. They're eating me alive. So I'm gonna go inside, and I hope you enjoyed this tour as much as I did. I love coming back from a trip and looking at the garden and seeing what has changed and seeing how much food I've got. Thank you guys for being here, and I will catch you on the next one.